I want to welcome each of you that are listening tonight. Um, this is our Wednesday night question and answer time. We're fielding questions tonight of people that have asked questions either last evening or the previous week because we weren't set up to do Q&A last week. I want to remind each of you that if you have questions, I would encourage you to send those to me. I'm Ken at ken@hopeandanswers.com so that we can address your concerns as well as answer your questions in a timely and in a truthful manner. So we're going to get started tonight. We have a series of questions that have been sent in. I will be asking the questions, and Alexis, who you listen to every Tuesday night, will be responding to those questions.
Yes.
If for some reason you would want more of a response or an answer, I would encourage you to just drop me an email because my intent is whatever emails I get, you will have a response the next morning. Because I don't think it's fair if you're going to ask something not to be prompt in giving you a response. So I would encourage people to do that. Okay, the first question tonight is, are boundaries permanent or do they change based on where I am in my life?
Okay. So kind of to remind everybody what boundaries kind of are, they're kind of that fence, but they're not for other people, they're for ourselves that allow us, that we put up for ourselves. And it's kind of our rules for our life, how we want to live out our lives. So it's asking do they change based on where someone is in life? And I would say yes and no, because boundaries are a reflection of your values, essentially. So you have this handful of values, and your boundaries are going to kind of go alongside that. But they do change because you evolve. Everyone evolves and everyone learns. And so as you evolve and as you learn, those boundaries will grow to kind of fit that. So I would say a simple answer of kind of yes. So your boundaries will change, but they will relatively stay along your values.
Okay. The next question that was sent in, and this is a difficult one. We've talked about it in the first 2 weeks, but I think it does need some further clarification. And the question is, please explain again the difference between self-worth and self-esteem.
Okay. So self-worth and self-esteem. Your self-worth is an external reality. It's always there. You can't tell somebody it's not there. You always have a self-worth. It's an everlasting value that you have in yourself. And then a self-esteem, that's an internal perception of yourself. So your self-esteem can change. You can have a high self-esteem and you can have a low self-esteem, but you cannot have a high self-worth or a low self-worth. You just have a self-worth. And that's the difference between it. You can have a really, really crappy day. You wake up and you just feel like crap about yourself. That's where you would have a low self-esteem, but you can overcome that because you already have that everlasting self-worth. You still are worthy of things. You still have value as a person, even though you don't feel the greatest that day. And that's kind of the difference in those, between those two.
Okay. The next question we have is, I often speak negative about myself. What are some ways I can turn that into positive thoughts?
The negative thoughts, a lot of people, even people who practice many, many times to have positive thoughts, every once in a while a negative thought will come trickling down. It's just how we are as humans. You'll always get that negative thought. And when people really struggle with that, constant negative thoughts. A good way that I have learned to turn that into positive thoughts is baby steps. It's so silly sometimes, baby steps, because they're such small, tiny gestures, but they do a lot in the long run. So when you have a negative thought that you think of yourself, like, oh, I didn't do well because I didn't do well because I'm just a loser. I just didn't do well. It's just how I am. It's just who I am. When you say those things and you recognize that, hey, that's not how we should be speaking about ourselves, we turn that, hey, you know what? I didn't get a good grade on that, but I'm going to do better next time, or I did my best and this is the grade I got, and that's that. Even though those negative situations happen and thoughts happen, we need to, and we can, because it's a choice, change that into positive thoughts. The more we do that, the more our brain automatically has that reaction to channel a negative thing into something positive. It's just about, I think, repetition and being consistent with positive thoughts.
Okay. Next question is, how hard is setting boundaries when you didn't grow up with boundaries?
Okay, I like this question because I wasn't given necessarily a good set of boundaries growing up. So as I got older and I become more aware of right and wrong, because that's something we do know is right from wrong, whether we were given boundaries young age or not. And then that's where I kind of had to choose, like, myself. I had to choose for myself. It's a choice. And once I've learned right from wrong and I'm recognizing the wrong, I can make that choice and make it right. And I can protect myself in certain ways, and I can see situations differently, and I can put those barriers and boundaries up where I think sees fit. But it is something that is very hard to do when you weren't necessarily given a set of boundaries growing up, because now it's more of like living out life and building those boundaries with your experiences and values you learn to have, because they weren't instilled in me at a young age. I had to kind of build them on my own. So it is difficult and it is a process, but it is the most achieving process you can go through, because once you've set those boundaries with yourself, and especially if you set those boundaries by yourself, it is a lot more achieving, because you're going through self-discipline, you're going through that self-worth, you're going through putting those boundaries up for yourself, and you're making that choice for yourself. And that's when I feel like your confidence just kind of naturally goes with you. But yes, setting boundaries is something that is very difficult to do, especially when some kids they have boundaries from their parents, because their parents have values and they transfer that on to their kids. And those kids have that not natural, but they kind of have more of a foundation to stand on, built by their parents. And so now you're put in a position where you have to build a foundation built by you, which can be more achieving when it's done, but it is definitely something that is not easy.
Okay. This question that Alexis just addressed is going to be talked about in more depth next week, and will probably be an ongoing discussion as we go through this podcast,
Correct.
because we have found that many younger people are challenged with setting up boundaries because they probably didn't grow up with a set of boundaries to follow to begin with as a guidepost.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a question that we will be we'll be addressing again next week. So stay tuned for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, the next question. See, this question comes from Gabby in Utah. How do I know if I actually value myself or just say that I do?
This is a very difficult question to answer in 30 seconds. This question I could probably go on about for a good 30 minutes, if that. And I just say that because it's so hard to actually. It's not necessarily hard to get into depth with it, but you have to get into depth to kind of grasp that understanding. So with this question, I think I'm going to not ignore it, obviously, but I'm going to pin it and I'm going to talk more about it in our next week lesson so we can actually have more of an understanding, because I don't want to sit here and try to talk about it and it not make sense and just kind of be a waste of time. So I actually want to pin this question for next week so me and Gabby can get into touch and actually discuss it properly.
Okay. I think it's important to understand that some of the questions that come in are sometimes more complicated than 2 or 3 sentences. And we're not going to ignore any of the questions. But as Alexis said, next week when we're having our Tuesday session, we have more time to address those issues. So if you can tune in next week, that would be good. Now, the next question is, what if people in my life don't see my worth? Does it really matter to me?
Now, if we're going to listen to this question, I already kind of have I already see like the trick in the question is, what if people don't see my worth? They don't have to, because your worth is always there. It's always existent. So whether those people may not treat you the way that somebody with worth should be treated, that's where we would have to instill boundary. If somebody in your life didn't see your worth, even though you already have worth, that's just a good example of, hey, I'm not going to be around these people anymore. And this question is another question that I could really talk about, because it's not, you're not living to achieve for others. You're living to achieve for yourself. So whether that person sees your worth or they don't, it doesn't change the fact of who you are and that you are valuable. So somebody coming into your life and they don't see your worth is a great example of somebody who doesn't need to be in your life. And it seems harsh, but that's where you need to protect yourself, because that's just negative at that point. There's no positive seeking in if somebody doesn't see your worth. I think personally that's where the line needs to be drawn. If you don't see my worth, cool. But I'm not going to be seeing you anymore either. And that's just like an example of protecting yourself and your peace. So, yes, I do not think it matters.
Yeah, I would encourage you that weren't with us the first 2 weeks. The first 2-week lessons dealt with understanding self-worth. And if you have the opportunity, you might want to go back and review those 2 podcasts. It may give you a little clearer understanding of what self-worth really is. But that's up to you.
Yes.
The next question is, what if the people I care about try to lower my self-worth?
That one, if somebody cares about you, that's actually another trick question one, because your self-worth can't be lowered. It's kind of the same answer as the last one. You can't lower a self-worth. It's always there, correct? So if somebody that you care about lowers or your self-esteem, say perhaps, that's a great example of a boundary, because people don't get to lower your self-worth. That's up to you, or that's not up to you. I'm not saying you get to lower your self-worth, but that's not up to them. Even if we were talking about self-esteem, if somebody you care about is lowering your self-esteem, that's not somebody who cares about you. People who care about you shouldn't be doing that, especially intentionally. So I think that's another example of where you put that boundary of, if you're going to make me feel this way, we are not going to exchange anything with each other. And that's just protecting your peace and protecting who you are.
Okay. Next question, which I want Alexis to spend a little bit more time on, is can social media really affect how I see myself?
Social media is a huge one. It's so huge that we have a whole, I don't know if it was 2 weeks, but we have definitely a week where we are going to sit down and talk about it for a good 30 minutes. Because social media is so, especially in this time, it is so normalized to be on social media. And I'm not saying social media is a bad thing, but I'm saying that it can be really effective to your character, especially people who still have developing brains. And I'm going to give a great example. If, say, it's just building up, where you know that it's just building up in that time, and you just don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel good about how you look. You don't feel good about what you're wearing, whatever the case may be, and you're in that sad time, and let's use TikTok as an example. You open TikTok, and the first thing you see is this top star model who's had all this surgery to be perfect, made to look, and I put this in quotation marks, perfect. And they get all this positive feedback, and say you've had a really bad week, you've been getting negative feedback, and you see this person getting all this positive feedback about how they look, and then you see how people's treating them, and maybe you weren't treated like that. That can really tear you down. It's like a tear that you didn't need to have. Because everyone goes through those periods of life where you just kind of, not necessarily sulk, but you just, I guess, feel bad about yourself. Everyone kind of goes through those things. And when we open social media and we see somebody posting about, well, if you wear this, you're weird. Well, now you think, since you're wearing this, you're weird. It's so simple, because social media can catch you in such weak times, and it can consume you. And it's almost it's kind of funny, but it's kind of almost like it's like your cult leader. Like you go back to social media to seek approval, and sometimes it's just like a toxic relationship almost, social media can be. And that's why I think it's really important to be careful of what social media you're going on, and when you're going on social media, and why you're going on social media. You shouldn't go on social media to confide in emotions. It's just not a healthy environment all the time. And I think that needs to be made more aware of, because the constant comparison that I see with teenagers and social media is brutal, because most of the time they're comparing themselves to these 25-year-old models that are completely unrealistic to their lifestyle, and it tears them down completely. And it should not be that way. And it's okay to go on social media, but if you're having those weak times and you don't have necessarily the right mind to be on social media, that kind of strong sense of self, that strong head on your shoulders, it could really take you in a lot of different paths. Social media is very influencing. That's why they call these influencers, because it influences a lot. And it's not always positive things that are being influenced. And that's why I really like this question, because social media has almost gotten to the point, it's almost gotten to the point where social media is what we feel about ourselves. What social media is feeling is what we feel. And it's completely consumed us. And I think a lot of the time we need to stop and put our phones down. I'm still working on it. That's my goal this month, is to stay off my phone, because it really does take a toll on your mental health, your structure of life, your self-discipline. Just that one scroll on TikTok could take 4 hours of your day. And it could take 4 hours of all that confidence you built. It could take all of it away in just 1 minute. And that's how powerful social media could be. And we should not take it for granted.
Okay, which social medias do you feel could have the most negative impact on a person?
I think the most popular social media today would probably be Snapchat and TikTok. Snapchat, it's not necessarily how it's set up that's toxic. It's kind of how society uses it is toxic. Same with TikTok. With TikTok, people started off with it's a big platform where people relate to each other. They try to relate to each other, and they connect, and they find people that they can confide in, and this, that. And then it gets to a point where people almost go into like perfectionism. People who even are influencers themselves get consumed in the perfectionism, because if they aren't perfect, they are nothing. And that's all they have is their social media to tell them that. And that's what I think TikTok is really based on, is I'm going to be an influencer so I can seek the approval of others. And you get so consumed in it that once you kind of realize or get to that point, that weak point where it's like, this is not how I'm supposed to be living out my lives, it can be really traumatizing to get out of that situation, because you've dug yourself so far in the consumption of social media. So I definitely think it'd be Snapchat and TikTok. YouTube, not that bad. Still, you can find.
We hope not.
Yes, we hope not. There's always a bad apple in every bunch wherever you go. But I would say TikTok and Snapchat. If you do not have a developed brain, you probably shouldn't be on it. That's just my opinion.
And I would just add, I think when we're looking at boundaries, this would be a very appropriate place to start setting boundaries for yourself, so that you can control that which you may choose or not choose to engage in. So for you that maybe are struggling a little bit with, where do I start with boundaries, I think this would be a good entry level place.
Yeah.
Okay. We got a few more questions. What does it look like to love yourself without being prideful?
Okay. Well, let's break down what being prideful is. Being prideful is kind of trying to convince people that you love yourself. It's kind of like you're trying to convince people that you love yourself, and you're trying to convince them to love you too. That's kind of how I see pridefulness. And when you're loving yourself is completely different. And the only way I can really explain that is the way I love myself. I am comfortable with who I am and the mistakes I make and the wrong I make. Not comfortable to where I'm not recognizing it and changing it, but comfortable enough with myself to give myself grace with with the things that I do. And I also struggle with like that little bit of, okay, maybe I'm being like I feel like a little conceited, but that's when I have to take a step back. And this is not me being conceited at all. This is me enjoying my achievement. It's not boasting to others to try to be better. It's enjoying my achievement. And a good example would be like if I got an A on something, I know not to go out to the rest of the people in my class and be like, I got an A, especially knowing when everyone didn't get an A. That would make me feel like I'm being prideful because all these people didn't get A's and I did. However, if I got an A, I'm allowed to be excited about getting that A because I got that A. And just going up to my friend and say, hey, I got an A on the thing or on the test, that's okay. Sometimes the line may be fine when it comes to being prideful or loving yourself, but the one thing I can say is being prideful, you don't really love yourself. You're just trying to it's kind of like a fake it till you make it situation. When you fake it till you make it, you get nothing but counterfeit lies. And that's kind of what being prideful is. It's kind of like, even though you're trying to convince yourself still, being prideful. Guys, look, I got an A. I'm so smart, guys. Look. Look, I'm so much better than all of you. That'd be more in the prideful section. But actually loving yourself and enjoying your achievement, whatever it is completely different. And if that's not being explained well or you're not understanding that well, definitely email a comment or concern so we can go through that more. Any of these questions, actually.
The last question we're going to entertain is, how do I remind myself of my worth when I'm feeling unmotivated and lost?
Okay. So everybody has potholes in life or bumps in the road, but we're going to use potholes. And every time you go in that pothole, you can sulk in it. You can sulk, but it does nothing for you, okay? It's kind of like being in that seasonal depression and you're laying in bed and laying in bed is going to dig you deeper in a hole because you have laundry to do, you have maybe work to do, schoolwork, whatever it may be, and you're sulking in bed for days and days and you're building up on that. And now you have a bunch of stress, a bunch of anxiety. You probably feel guilty and you probably are feeling a little bit of shame. And everyone's gone through that, at least probably once in your life. And the only thing that I know what to say, because I've been through it as well, is you have to kind of choose yourself. Because that's what I wasn't doing. I was kind of ignoring life, laying down in bed all the time. I was not choosing myself. I wasn't showering. You're not brushing your teeth, probably. You're not choosing yourself in those times. And that's where I'm like, okay, I need to get up and brush my teeth. And if I go lay back down, cool. At least I went and brushed my teeth. It's the baby steps. And okay, I have a bunch of homework I didn't do. I'm going to do 2 homework assignments and I should have done more, but this is what I'm going to do today because this is my baby step for today. And it just gets easier and easier on out. And it's like when you get in those potholes, you know what to do next. So you're not sulking in it. It becomes easier and easier as you practice. Just with anything in life, the more you practice it, the better you're good at. The better you are at it. And so to remind yourself of your worth when you're feeling unmotivated or lost, take those baby steps. Because they, like I said previously, they may seem silly, but those small gestures are you practicing choosing yourself. You are practicing choosing yourself or relearning to choose yourself, whatever it may be. And it's really important.
Okay. Those are the questions we have. I want to remind each of you that are listening that next Tuesday, our lesson is going to be living out your self-worth. So I would encourage you that are still not sure what your self-worth entails. I would encourage you to tune in next Tuesday when Gabby and Alexis go through this lesson in more detail. I want to thank each of you for joining us today, and I'm going to have Alexis close us out here.
Okay. I appreciate everyone for listening today. A reminder that today is our Q&A Wednesday, so we only do that from 4:30 to 5:30 if we need to, but usually we're going to range about going up to 30, 45 minutes maybe. Comments, questions, concerns, we need them for our Q&A Wednesdays, so please email at ken@hopeandanswers.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible, and we will also put it in our Q&A list, and we will go over it on Wednesdays at 4:30. And I appreciate you guys for listening once again. I do want to say that the questions that weren't answered are going to be answered next week. So tune in for Tuesday, where we will talk about self-worth. Thank you.
Yeah.